Congratulations for making it all the way to Dune Club Session 8. For this session, you should have read pages 448 through 520, which ends on the sentence, "She is my enemy." Now let's get into the recap. Previously in Dune, the Baron Harkonnen places his nephew, the Beast Raban, back in charge of Arrakis, ordering him to squeeze the planet of Prophet and drive its inhabitants into utter submission. Upon hearing the news of Raban's assignment and of Paul's assumed death, Gurney Halleck decides to stay on with the smugglers in order to exact his personal revenge. Meanwhile, Paul and Jessica emerge from the sandstorm alive, crash their thopter in the deep desert, and must use every bit of their training to survive in the wasteland until they are caught by the Fremen. And on the Baron's order, Liet Kynes is left to die in the desert, and the Fremen leader is killed by the very planet he loves. In Session 8, we stay with Paul and Jessica as they find their way into a Fremen tribe. On Liet's final command, Paul is given sanctuary outright, whereas Jessica must use violence against the leader Stilgar and bests him. In doing so, she proves her worth and is accepted into the tribe upon the condition that she shares her knowledge of the Bene Gesserit way of battle with them. Even though Jessica continues to insinuate herself and Paul using the Missionaria Protectiva, manipulating the Fremen into believing they are the chosen ones prophesied in the native religious myths and legends, she is powerless to stop a trial by combat to test her part in the legend. According to the rules, Paul must act as her champion, and he must win or die in a ritualistic one-on-one knife fight. Paul wins, making the Fremen warrior Jamis his first true kill, proving once again to the Fremen people that he and his mother are the figures of prophecy. Paul is named a man and Jessica a priestess among the tribe, and witness a hidden cache of sacred water while on their journey to their new home, Sietch Tabor. So an entire company of 40 Fremen, led by Stilgar, sneak up on Paul and Jessica, and then they argue about what to do with these two. They take Paul in, as per the instructions of the late Liet Kynes' final command, but this command did not state that they had to also protect Jessica. And since the Fremen see her as a weak off-worlder who would only be a burden, they decide to kill her and take her water. In this moment, she takes advantage of their underestimation of her, pretends to faint like a weak woman would, and surprise, she whips around and takes Stilgar while Paul makes a run for it, knocks the Fremen Jamis down, takes his weapon, and climbs up into the rocks. Since Jessica has showed herself to be a super badass and has beaten Stilgar, the strongest man among them, they are like, "Whoa, never mind, lady, you can totally join us, and we will keep you two a secret even from the other Fremen. Just teach us your super badass weirding ways." Which, by the way, the weirding way is a term that essentially means something that appears mystical or magical. So after the deal is settled and Paul goes to leave his hiding place, he meets Chani, the girl of his literal dreams, for the first time. And at first, Paul is horrified that a girl has been able to get the drop on him, but he ends up going with the flow when Stilgar puts her in charge of him. By the way, it's super important to note that she introduces herself as Chani, daughter of Liet. Yeah, that Liet. So now Paul is hanging out with the daughter of the man who used to lead the Fremen people. Also, Paul and Jessica get these really cool neck scarves that denote that they are of Stilgar's tribe, which also happens to be green, the same color of the Atreides banner. So perf. So now they're with the Fremen, and when they reach the Cave of Ridges to bed down for the day, not the night because they sleep during the day, Jessica and Stilgar take a moment to talk to one another. Jessica finds out that the Fremen are working with the smugglers to pay these huge bribes of spice to the guild in order to keep their skies free of satellites so that no one may spy on their progress as they secretly terraform the planet. She's also shocked to learn that the Fremen can control the worms, keeping them out of certain territory and even riding on their backs, like mind blown. Jessica and Stilgar explore the question of conflict over tribal leadership. Because Jessica has proven herself to be stronger than Stilgar, but that she's still not of the desert and that she isn't prepared to lead the Fremen, there's this huge problem going on. So immediately, Jessica thinks about allying herself to Stilgar through marriage. And this would end the conflict, but Stilgar is like, I see what you're thinking, but no, girl. Because, you're super hot, but if I make you one of my wives, my young Fremen will think that I'm too into the ladies and, not enough into leadership. And I don't want to have to fuck their shit up because they're young and dumb. So how about instead you become a Sayadina among us? And as our high priestess, you can be a spiritual leader, and then things between us will be totally chill, and we can be friends instead. To which Jessica is like, damn, okay. So now, Jessica senses that it's her turn to give Stilgar a sign to show him that she is indeed the Bene Gesserit of legend. And she turns once more to the Missionaria Protectiva and uses this memory technique to call the prayer of Salat to the front of her mind. She says the words and she plays the role perfectly. And it's important to note that before she begins, Jessica senses wild changes here, as though someone had been among these Fremen and capitalized upon the Missionaria Protectiva's imprint. And now we see that Leah Kynes' father used the Bene Gesserit religious seating for his own purposes, and how he was able to twist religion and law together to create his constructive ecological tool out of the native population. Now, during all of this, Paul has a waking dream. While his mother is leading the Fremen in a religious cant, Paul is dragged back into a terrible purpose spice trip after ingesting a massive amount of melange infused with the Fremen food that he was given to eat. And once again, his awareness opens to the consciousness of the entire human race. The one-eyed vision of the past, the one-eyed vision of the present, and the one-eyed vision of the future, all combined in a trinocular vision that permitted him to see time become space. What? And while trying desperately to hang on to the now, because he's tripping the fuck out, okay? This guy's tripping balls right now, so he's trying anything he can to hang on to this moment. He comes to realize that just like in quantum physics, he changes and influences the future just by observing it, which harkens back to the header of this chapter, which asks, how much of prophecy is actual prediction, and how much is the prophet shaping the future to fit the prophecy? It's the age-old question of nature versus nurture. And according to Duke Leto, during his last realization at the time of his death, it's both. It's always both. And Paul becomes aware of the butterfly effect, that he is currently in a nexus of possibility wherein the entire universe will feel the consequences of the smallest action that happen in this very cave at this very fucking moment. Okay, it's heavy shit, man. It's dealing with some stuff. The next morning, Jamis, the man who Paul bested in their first encounter, is still butthurt about the whole thing, and he calls Jessica out, saying that she is a fraud. Ironically, he isn't wrong and invokes something called the Amtal rule, which is the right to test Jessica's part in the legend with a trial by combat in which Paul must be her champion. Now, Stilgar tries to talk mad shit about him, saying that Jamis has too much of the Ghafla, which is an Arabic term meaning that he's distracted from God, which is like a huge major insult. And he's trying to get Jamis to challenge him to protect Paul. But this dude isn't having it. Like, he's like, no, get out of here. And then Jessica comes in. She uses the voice on him to plant fear within him. But then he calls her out too, saying like, look, she's using some witch shit on me. And so he invokes this silence. And now it is up to Paul. Like, Jessica can't do anything. Stilgar can't do anything. Paul must enter into his first one-on-one knife fight to the death. A fight in which he has seen himself die in countless times the night before when he was in his giant spice drug trip. Luckily, Paul wins using the aid of Chani's information about Jamis' strengths and weaknesses, on top of clearly being a superior fighter in both mind and body. Now, Jessica sees this and takes ultimate care that he does not grow to enjoy such a victory, because Paul's just whipped this guy's ass, okay? And she uses the voice of scorn on him to interrupt his big glory moment, which returns him to his senses. And then Stilgar delivers like the second punch, telling Paul that he may have played with Jamis, but he is not going to pull that shit off with him when the day comes. And hearing the bitterness in Stilgar's voice, like, this gives rise to remorse within Paul. And then he and his mother explain that Paul has never killed before, and that the reason that he was resisting killing this guy was not because he was playing with him, but because he didn't want to kill him. And so now Stilgar understands the deal. He's like, oh, I totally get it. He's relieved that Paul isn't some fucking psycho. And now, since Paul has lost a form of virginity, he has earned the right to be called a man among the Fremen. Stilgar gives him the secret name of Usul to be used only among this tribe, and Paul takes the name of Paul Muad'Dib for himself as his open name among the Fremen people. And this is a name that he has not seen in any of his visions of the future. And by him doing this, he's making a small attempt to forestall the holy war that he has seen waged in his name. Like, maybe if he does something different, he can stop this jihad. Now, going back to his names, Usul means the base of the pillar. And this is a name that denotes strength. But it also foreshadows Paul's legacy of how he is at the bottom of this whole new deal that will forever change the universe. I mean, the Atreides that come after him are just like build upon this craziness. And the name Muad'Dib is the name of a desert jumping mouse. And among the Fremen, that is a symbol of wisdom. And he is also called an instructor of boys, just as Paul, who has just become the next step of human evolution, will become the instructor of the human race, who is still but a child. Now it's time for Jamis' funeral. Paul begrudgingly accepts his water as to not break with Fremen custom. Like, he doesn't want it. He's totally creeped out by this, and like doesn't even want to be reminded of the man that he's killed. And then later again, as to not break with tradition, Paul participates in the ritual of the funeral. He gets up. He takes a balisette from Jamis' belongings, and as he does this, he acutely feels the pain of taking another human being's life, and states that when you kill, you pay for it. And then he sheds tears, which strikes the Fremen people into total awe. I mean, he's giving moisture to the dead. I mean, this is like sacred water. And at the end of the ceremony, Chani gives Paul Jamis' water. And there's this really totally adorable moment when Paul asks Chani to hold his water counters, because even though she gives him a thing of water, like they're going to go put that in their reserve. And so he just gets like these little tokens to denote that like he has this amount of water. And Paul doesn't know that in the Fremen culture, asking a girl to hold your water counters is essentially asking a girl to be your girlfriend. And finally, Paul and Jessica are pressed deeper into the cave through a secret passage into one of the Fremen's massive water caches. It's like this cathedral church of water for the Fremen. And Paul has seen this place in his dreams. And this place and this water will be used to change the face of Arrakis in their dream of terraforming the planet. While Jessica is busy scheming away, thinking of how she needs to let Paul know that he cannot take a Fremen woman as a wife, that Paul is still a duke and he must marry as befits his station. And she also is thinking about how the Fremen could be wielded like a sword to win back his royal place for him. Paul decides to make a move on Chani. She asks him to sing a song for her, and he sings her a love song. And Jessica is like so dumb. Like, she's asking herself, like, why would my son sing a love song to Chani, like this girl child? And it's like, hello, Jessica. Like, really, girl? Paul is giving himself essentially to another woman, a woman who will give him a measure of the normalcy that he is lost in becoming the Kwisatz Haderach, which was created from the ground up by his mother. Like, he doesn't want to spend his entire life being a tool for her revenge. And so now, Paul declares to himself that Jessica is his new enemy. So that's it for session 8. For session 9, you need to read pages 521 through 587, which ends on the sentence, "Always," she said, and kissed his cheek. Also, this is where book 3, The Prophet, begins, so just if you get to book 3, The Prophet, you're there. And now, get your questions ready for our live Q&A on Twitch at 3 p.m. on Sundays, Pacific Standard Time.